Okay, so today we are going to go over level 6 EE.3. We're just going to be talking about some of the properties that we'll be using in this learning target. The first property that we'll be going over is the commutative property of addition and multiplication. So there is a property for addition and a property for multiplication. The commutative property of multiplication and addition basically is saying that the order of the numbers don't matter. So the order of the numbers do not matter. You'll get the same result. Okay, so in other words, 3 plus 4 will always be 7, or 4 plus 3 will always be 7. So as you can see in the property, we're still using the numbers 3 and 4. They are flipped and they are moved around. But according to the commutative property of addition, it doesn't matter what order the numbers are in, you always get the same answer. And then the same thing goes for multiplication. So if you're dealing with multiplication and say you have 6 times 4, your answer will be 24. Or 4 times 6, you'll still get 24. As long as you're using the same numbers, the order that they appear in don't matter because the result will always be the same. The associative property of addition and multiplication is a little bit different. It still states that the order of the grouping. Now this says the grouping. The grouping. So the order of the grouping does not matter. Okay. So if you pay close attention, we're going to have, now let's say for example, we're going to have 8 plus 7 plus 3, and I'm going to group them. I'm going to put them in my parentheses now. 8 plus 7 is a group. I will have 15 plus 3 is 18. Now if I change my grouping, now my group is going to be 7 and 3. My answer will still be, well, that's according to PEMDAS, you always do what's in the parentheses first. We have 10 plus 8, which is 18. Now notice, up in the commutative property, my numbers are moving, but notice in the associative property, my numbers don't move. The only thing that's moving are my groups. So my parentheses moved from my 8 to my 7 to my 7 to my 3. It's very important that you notice that your grouping is moving in associative property. Now it's the same deal when you're dealing with multiplication, but notice it's all addition, so it has to stay all addition, okay? So let's say for multiplication, let's do something, I don't know, 5 times 3 times 2 is going to be 15 times 2 is 30. You should get the same result if you do 5 times 3 times 2, which is 6 times 5, which is also 30. Okay, so notice how my groups changed. I went from my 5 and my 3 to my 3 and my 2. Very, very important. Something that you guys might want to put on the side note is that whenever you're dealing with the associative property, you're going to be dealing with groups, and at your guys' level, it's mostly going to be parentheses, okay? So associative property starts with AP, associative property, and I like to think of it as always parentheses. I don't want to take up too much room, so let's just write parentheses, okay? So always parentheses. Whenever you see parentheses, you need to automatically say that associative property is an option, but you do need to pay attention. What is moving? Is it going to be your grouping or is it going to be your numbers? Because if you're grouping, then it's your properties. If it's just your numbers, it's your commutative property, okay? Now let's move on to the identity property. Now the identity property, well, we know what identity means. Your identity is who you are. So identity property is basically saying anything times itself is 1. So the number that is multiplied by itself will always be itself. So any number times itself, I'm sorry, any number times 1 will be itself. Okay, so this is something that we learn very, very early. Now we're putting a name to it. It's like 1 times 3 will always be 3. 1 times 5 will always be 5. 1 times 328 will be 328. Okay. The additive identity. Again, this is something that we learned at a very young age, earlier in our math careers. And that's basically saying that adding 0 to any number won't change it. Okay, so adding 0, adding the number 0. To any number will not change the number, change the value, I guess. Okay, so 28 plus 0 will still be 28. 32 plus 0 will still be 32. 137 plus 0 will still be 137. Now, of the properties, the most often used property that you'll see and the most difficult to manipulate will be the distributive property. We're going to talk about what the distributive property is, and then we'll go into showing on how to actually use it, okay? A way that I like to say the distributive property is we have the word distribute. So we know that distribute means that we want to give something to everybody. We want to distribute something. Ms. Robles has 25 pencils and she wants to distribute those 25 pencils to her 25 students. So every one of my students will get a pencil. So the distributive property, you'll see something that looks like, I don't know, 3 times 4 plus 6, okay? And I want to distribute it. So what I'm distributing here is my 3, okay? So I want my 3 to be distributive to all of its little friends on the inside, okay? So when I want to rewrite this, and I know that my parentheses are right here, and I want to have a number next to parentheses, that means to multiply. So I'm going to have 3 times my 4, and I'm still using the addition, so I have to have my addition symbol. 3 times my 6. Okay, oops, let me parentheses. And then we're going to go ahead and say, well, that's 12 plus 3 times 6 is 18, and that is going to equal 30. And we just use the distributive property that way. Okay, now this can work with anything. Say we threw in some variables and we didn't know what the number was. Let's go 6 times m minus 4. Okay, again, the number on the outside needs to be distributed to everything that's on the inside. And I would draw these little arrows because they're cute, and you know, it kind of just reminds us that we need to be distributing that 6 to everything on the inside. So when I rewrite it, it's going to look like 6 times m minus, my symbol is minus, so I'm going to keep my minus symbol, minus 4 times 6. Okay, and I'm allowed to switch my numbers up a little bit if I wanted to. Notice over here I went 3 first, but over here I kept my negative 4 first. According to my commutative property of multiplication, my order doesn't matter. So for me, I just like the way that it looks better down here because it makes more sense to me. And according to the property, I'm allowed to do that. So once I finish drawing this out, 6 times m is just 6m because I don't know the value, so it's going to say a multiplication problem, an unknown value, minus 4 times 6, which is 24. And that's how we use the distributive property. Now again, distributive property, I like to say, oh, the little guy on the outside wants to shake everybody's hand on the inside. So we can write that in your definition if you like. Let's do something a little bit more academic. the outside number or variable, because sometimes it will be a variable, and a variable is an unknown number represented by a letter, needs to be multiplied by all the numbers or variables on the inside, or in the inside, of the, and again, I don't want to waste space, the parentheses. Okay, so there you have it for level 6 EE.3. You have your properties that you'll be using in this learning target. Once you're on IXL, though you'll be practicing, and it may or may not ask you specifically for the name of the property. It may ask you, if you're using this property, what number will make this sentence true. Like I said, the most difficult one is going to be the distributive property. We're going to put a lot of our focus on practicing the distributive property. Okay, so good luck, enjoy. If you have questions, please ask me.